After analyzing a number of open sources, I was able to create a map showing the countries where the Russian Federation is recruiting mercenaries for the war in Ukraine. And you know, the scale is impressive. Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, Sierra Leone, Central African Republic, Libya, Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, Burkina Faso, Eritrea, South Sudan, Kenya, Congo, Lebanon, Syria, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, India. This list is not exhaustive. Actually, I think you've noticed yourself that lately there are more and more photos and videos with, let's say, non-Slavic faces among the ranks of the Armed Forces Russian Federation. According to the Information Resistance Center, the Russian side has recruited about 15,000 people from various countries in total. In fact, the very fact that the embassies of some of the above-mentioned countries have officially demanded that Moscow stop recruiting their citizens, and the Indian Special Services even had to carry out a special operation to shut down an entire network involved in recruiting people to fight in the war in Ukraine. All of this clearly points to an unprecedented scale of recruitment.
Who is he?
These are contract soldiers who have signed contracts.
What is his nationality?
Iranian,
Jalidov Samir Gyunduzogli, Kuspanov Aybolat Ziakhmetovich, Hussein Mahmoud Mohammed Abbas.
Syria,
Al-Shibli Wahid, Said Ibrahim Dasukinur.
Syria and Egypt.
As they say, Russia is fighting for traditional values. By the way, that's exactly why this video will have an English dubbing track. I want people in Europe and the United States who see Putin and Russia as the last stronghold of conservatism to watch it. So, I ask you to share the video on Twitter if you are registered there. And I also have to remind you again to subscribe to the channel. By doing this, you will already help spread this content. Thank you in advance. So, 15,000 mercenaries from dozens of countries. A whole division. And it seems clear that this way, Moscow is trying to reduce social tension within the country. Trying to find degenerates who are ready to kill for money in other countries so they don't have to look for such degenerates in their own. But at the same time, the question arises, is it really worth the effort? Is it really possible that 15,000 mercenaries from all over the world don't create a whole range of difficulties, from language barriers to logistical problems? Militant recruitment is done through front companies promising earning opportunities to people from Latin America, Africa, and Asia. This is a well-organized structure that cooperates both with local criminals and with corrupt officials. And once again, this is happening not only in the countries of the African continent where the political influence of Russian private military companies is strong. I'm quoting an official document from the Central Bureau of Investigation of India for you. I'll leave the link in the description. Human traffickers operated as an organized network, luring Indian citizens through social media channels as well as local agencies offering high-paying jobs in Russia. The human trafficking victims, Indian citizens, were then forcibly given combat training and deployed to Russian frontline bases in Ukraine against their will. So you see, the Kremlin didn't just organize an advertising campaign on Facebook. Russia is involved in international human trafficking by deceiving people into joining the war. The official Cuban Foreign Ministry also stated this, emphasizing that the network trafficking Cubans who are being sent to fight in Ukraine operates from Russian territory. Once again, this is an official statement, but for both of us, this fact is not surprising at all. Russia bombs peaceful cities with ballistic missiles every day. Is it any wonder that these so-called defenders of traditional values are also trafficking people? But that's not what I'm talking about. But what's the point of recruiting people from other countries? Moscow clearly isn't interested in damaging its relationship with India. Is recruiting a few thousand Indians really more important than $65 billion in trade with Bharat? Or with other countries that are clearly not thrilled about their citizens being sent to fight in someone else's war?
Don't you see that our guys are giving their lives? They're not just speaking out, not just talking, but defending with their lives the right not only of the African continent, but of all people on our planet.
And that's the key point. The practice of recruiting citizens from foreign countries is not an attempt to reduce social tension in the country or to keep some Russian men at home. No, or rather, yes, but only partly. You know yourself how human resources are spent in the Russian army. 15,000 mercenaries won't significantly impact the Russian army's combat capability. And such a number of militants doesn't affect the timing of additional mobilization in Russia itself either. Conversely, recruiting and integrating non-Russian speaking militants into the army requires considerable effort. But the most important thing, as I mentioned above, is the political risks. They are quite high, just like in the case with India. However, I didn't just randomly include the speech of Maria Zakharova, who claims with a straight face that Russia is bombing Ukraine for a free Africa. No, this is not just drunken nonsense. This is the most important task for Russia, namely, to convince the countries of the global south that the war in Ukraine is an anti-colonial war and that it is being fought against a common enemy in the form of the West. And recruiting fighters from Latin America, Africa and Asia is one of the ways to accomplish this task. After all, in this way, countries are involuntarily drawn into a so-called anti-Western coalition, which in fact does not yet exist.
At that time, it was hard to imagine that NATO countries, the United States of America and European states would first intervene indirectly and then directly in this conflict. First some missiles, then more powerful missiles.
Yes, that's a very important point. Moscow really didn't expect that so many countries would unite around Ukraine. I understand how that sounds. Frankly, Western support is sluggish, to put it mildly. But in previous videos, I tried to explain to you the reason for such caution. But you see, here's the twist. The so-called axis of evil turned out to be even less consolidated in this regard than the so-called democratic world supporting Kyiv. You can likely guess where Czech Republic President Petr Pavel obtains the shells, correct? As the Wall Street Journal writes, the Czech Republic is re-exporting from South Africa, which is a member of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But there is also a number of indirect pieces of evidence that another member of this organization, India, has also decided to resell shells to Ukraine. By the way, I wouldn't be surprised if the scandal with the Mercenary recruitment network influenced New Delhi's decision. Where does Ukraine get FPVs and cameras for them? Various reconnaissance drones, components for electronic warfare and electronic intelligence, and several hundred other items that are vital on the front lines right now. All of this comes from China. Beijing could restrict the export of Mavics and allow their sale only to Russia. It would be disastrous for Ukraine's military if an anti-Western coalition formed, but luckily they haven't succeeded in creating one yet, and Russia is literally using every possible way to involve as many countries as possible in the criminal war unleashed by the Russian Federation, including recruiting citizens from various countries. Of course, the question arises, how does a country get integrated into the Kremlin's orbit through the recruitment of militants? Let me make a brief digression as an example.
If we want to live in a balanced world that takes into account the interests of all people, especially those living in a particular area, the moods, plans, and aspirations of these people must be considered. So, we will build our policy towards this region as well as towards Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Republika Srpska precisely on these principles.
In one of my videos, I already raised the issue of the Republika Srpska, which is part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, stating that this is one of the regions where Russia will fuel separatist sentiments. In fact, the international criminal Vladimir Putin stated this directly at his press conference 5 months ago. On April 5th, the President of the Republic again raised the issue of seceding from Bosnia and Herzegovina. The forceful enforcers of this idea are these guys from the so-called organization Serbian Honor, these people right here. And here the head of this movement is receiving an award from Russian General Valery Kalyakin. Did representatives of this movement go through the crucible of the hybrid Russian-Ukrainian war in Donbass? Well, that's obvious. The thing is, war is actually the perfect way to train and unite a group that, upon returning home, can organize combat cells to influence the political course of events in a given country. But while such organizations in Serbia and its satellites are the result of previous events, for example, the recruitment of Cubans is an investment in the future, and they approach this matter with full responsibility. Look, according to Spanish-language media, the person responsible for recruiting Cubans introduced herself as Diana Diaz.
This man openly explains how Cubans are recruited. He contacted an intermediary named Diana through a messenger app. Here is their conversation. He sent her his documents, waited for further instructions, and a plane ticket to Russia.
Diana Diaz, located through her leaked phone number, is seen standing in a Russian military enlistment office. And behind her, I suppose, is the one who came to defend traditional values in Ukraine. And for killers like him, this is an opportunity to escape poverty. In Cuba, where the salary is just a few $100s, that's already considered a great fortune. A contract with the Russian army, where they pay more than $2,000, is practically salvation. That's exactly why there are so many people who want to do it.
Her husband, Enrique, previously a Mason in Cuba, now serves in the Russian army. We spoke with him through a video call. The man in military uniform shows the training camp.
I knew the contract was real when I arrived. The Russian Federation brought me here. Everyone here knew why they came.
Many similar journalistic investigations are found in the international and Spanish language press. Cubans are lured by deception, offered jobs at fake companies, promised safe positions in the Russian army's rear, or influenced ideologically. The scale of recruitment in this island nation has become so massive that even the Cuban Foreign Ministry, which is friendly toward Moscow, had to issue another official accusation against Russia. After all, Cuban officials understand perfectly well what happens when such people return home. Because even if you trick an islander into going to war, he'll either get killed or, on the contrary, turn into a militant with combat experience. He'll form strong bonds with fellow countrymen who may have been deceived into the trenches similarly. But he'll also meet those who came to kill for money on purpose. And when he returns home, it's a close-knit, well-organized group with combat experience. Critically, they sustain robust connections with their Russian handlers. And then the following happens.
We are ready to work together on developing trade and economic cooperation.
We want changes in our policy. Some of our traditional partners are turning their backs on us, and we see who our real friend is then.
At the table in the Kremlin palace sits an international criminal, a terrorist and murderer, calling for the genocide of an entire population. Opposite him sits the current president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who in September 2022 overthrew the previous leader of this African country, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, who had seized power as a result of a coup d'etat carried out in the same year, 2022. Yes, there were 2 coups in Burkina Faso in 1 year, but as you can see, Putin, the great fighter for legitimate power in other countries, is not bothered by this. The coup happened with the backing of CHVK Wagner, which is a straightforward explanation. It was they who trained Traoré's militants, and he even received congratulations from Yevgeny Prigozhin. But the late Yevgeny, in my opinion, was a bit dishonest when he claimed that the coup happened for the good of the people of Burkina Faso. After all, it partly happened in the interests of Prigozhin's companies, which received contracts for mineral extraction in that country. And of course, there are plenty of such examples. I even drew a whole diagram showing how recruitment, training and preparation of militants works, how they then turn into political forces that actually control the state. And the fact that more and more people from different countries are now appearing on Ukrainian soil should concern not only Kyiv but other capitals as well. Firstly, this war targets not only Ukraine but also the capitals of the global south. And the fact that many countries marked on this map refused to take part in the peace summit and did not support Ukraine in its struggle for survival.
It only speaks to the short-sightedness of the political elites of these very countries.
What did they do with the foreigners? Did they throw them into the pit too?
Foreigners? No, they were kind of separate people for us. You know, how do you say it? They were untouchable in a way, but we didn't decide anything about them anymore. The most we could do was deal with them. That was about what would happen at the positions. The rest of the questions, that was already...
How many, in general, how many black foreign brothers did you have? Well, pure Russians.
They sent us 14 people, but then within a few days they were taken away. Because it was difficult with them, not knowing their language, and they didn't really know ours either. There were 2 interpreters, but that wasn't enough.
In the company of 80 people, 14 were foreigners. Even though they don't understand a word of Russian, they are untouchable and are supervised directly by the regiment's command. As they say, that's exactly what needed to be proven. So you see, for Putin, Ukraine has become a testing ground, a camp where militants from Asia, Africa and Latin America are being trained. He was so eager to protect Donbass that now, instead of the once flourishing Mariupol, there are ruins with people from Central Asia. He tried so hard to prove that Ukrainians and Russians are brothers that he brought 15,000 moral degenerates into Ukraine, people who are ready to rob, kill and rape Ukrainians for money. He tried so hard to make Russia a superpower, but instead of building an economy, soft power and technology, the essential elements of any superpower, he only learned how to intimidate and terrorize his neighbors. And since this video will be translated into English, I would like to address those who are considering signing a contract with the Russian armed forces and going to war. Don't do it, because it's up to you to live or just die on Ukrainian soil.